$8 trillion. Not the budget, but the bill. In September 2025, construction stopped. No announcement was made. No failure was declared. The project was not canceled, not paused. It simply stopped being mentioned. $50 billion had been spent. 2.4 kilometers of foundation existed in the desert. The original plan was 170 kilometers, 9 million residents, a city taller than any structure ever built. No roads, no cars, no emissions. A guaranteed 20-minute commute for every single person, inside a mirror-walled structure stretching across a desert. McKinsey was inside the project. AECOM, Bechtel, BCG, McLaren's Formula One team carried the logo. Heads of state cited it at Davos. FIFA announced the 2034 World Cup final would be played on its roof. Every major institution in the world signed their name to this, not because they believed it, but because they couldn't afford not to. This video is not about a construction project that failed. It is not about one man's ambition. It is about something that has happened before and will happen again. What happens when a system cannot allow itself to stop, even after failure is already visible? And then people started planning their lives around it. In October 2017, NEOM was announced, not as a project, but as a direction. A 170-kilometer straight line through the desert. No roads, no cars, 9 million residents, a guaranteed 20-minute life. At first it sounded like architecture. Then it stopped being architecture and became a decision point. In Riyadh, university graduates began changing their plans, not because they were told to, but because something new had appeared on the map of their future. NEOM was hiring. Salaries doubled, then tripled. Job descriptions stopped looking like jobs. They looked like entry tickets to something irreversible. One young engineer left a stable position in Jeddah, relocated, signed a 2-year contract, and told his family, this is the beginning. He worked on the project for 3 years. When the suspension came, there was no formal notice. His contract simply was not renewed. He is still in Riyadh, in a city he helped design that does not exist. At Davos, NEOM was no longer discussed as a project. It was discussed as a direction. McKinsey, AECOM, Bechtel, BCG, all inside, not because they agreed, but because absence had become more expensive than participation. And at that moment something shifted. NEOM stopped being an idea and became a career path, a portfolio allocation, a line on a government minister's agenda. This was the system working exactly as designed, because every major institution in the world signed their name to this dream, not because they believed it, but because they couldn't afford not to. 3 weeks after NEOM was announced to the world, on the night of November 4, 2017, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh was closed to the public. 381 people were summoned, princes, ministers, billionaires, the most powerful men in the kingdom. They arrived believing they had been invited to a meeting. They were not allowed to leave. This was described, officially, as an anti-corruption campaign. Those who signed away portions of their assets were released. Those who refused were not. One general died in custody. Over $100 billion in real estate, companies, and cash transferred to the state. Survivors later described what happened inside: beatings, interrogations, coercion. But here is what the Ritz-Carlton actually was, underneath the official story. This was not corruption control. This was constraint removal. Because systems like this do not fail from ambition. They fail from permission structures. And that night, permission structures disappeared. Saying no was no longer a position. It was a cost. From this point forward, the system had no mechanism for doubt, no internal voice that could slow it, no structure that could absorb dissent. You don't build a $500 billion city in a kingdom where powerful men can say no. First, you make sure no one can say no. The collapse of NEOM did not begin when the costs exploded. It began that night, when the last person who could have stopped it was placed in a hotel room and told to sign. In 2017, the announced cost was $500 billion, already more than the GDP of most nations. An engineer is hired, a consultant is promoted, a contractor expands, a pension fund allocates. Each decision rational, individually, but together they create something that cannot be reversed. A network of people whose futures are now exposed to the continuation of the project. By 2022, the Crown Prince had revised the first phase alone to $319 billion. Private investors, he says, will cover the rest. The private investors do not come. By 2023, externally the project is still expanding. New partnerships announced, new renders released, new timelines published. But internally, capital inflows are slowing, risk flags are appearing in internal documents, and the PR system has not been told to stop. So it doesn't. The gap between what the project says and what the project is begins to widen, and nobody closes it. By 2024, an internal audit is completed and presented to NEOM's board. The Wall Street Journal obtains it. The real projected cost to complete NEOM in full, up to $8.8 trillion in internal modeling. More than 25 times Saudi Arabia's entire annual government budget. More than 4 times the kingdom's total GDP. Enough to build 16 interstate highway systems across the United States. The completion date in that audit, 2080. The same audit notes evidence of deliberate financial manipulation by certain members of management. Numbers had been adjusted. Reports had been shaped. The system had learned to protect its own story. Because by now, it was not a project anymore. It was a network of obligations. Bloomberg reports the line has been quietly scaled back, not 170 kilometers by 2030, but 2.4 kilometers. An American consultant sits in a conference room in Davos, presenting a slide deck to institutional clients. NEOM, the investment case for the next decade. He does not know about the audit. Or perhaps he has heard something. But the presentation is already scheduled. The clients are already in the room, and the deck goes out. In September 2025, construction on the line is suspended. 2 months later, a Saudi official stands at an investment forum in Riyadh and says, quietly, "We rushed at 100 miles an hour. We are now running deficits. We need to reprioritize." Not a collapse. A reprioritization, the language of systems that cannot admit what has happened. And then the system stopped, but only in documents, not in lives. A construction team arrives at the site. No order has been given to stop, so they work, because stopping requires instruction, and instruction never comes. A consultant still opens the project folder every morning, updates slides, sends status reports into an inbox that no longer generates replies, because the project still exists in PDFs, even if it no longer exists in reality. A worker in the compound housing waits for the next phase to begin. He has been told, delay, not cancellation. He does not book a flight home, because leaving is not stopping. Leaving is giving up. The system did not collapse. It disconnected from itself, and people remained inside it. In the northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia, in the Tabuk province, there is a region called Al-Qariba, where for centuries a tribe called the Hawitat had lived, their homes, their land, their ancestral territory. In 2020, the Saudi government informed them that their land was now part of NEOM. They were told to leave, offered compensation. Most left. Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti did not. He was 43 years old, with a phone and a YouTube account. He recorded a video in front of his house, an ordinary house, a concrete wall, a wooden door, and he looked directly into the camera. "This is my home," he said. "I will not leave." He said he expected the government to plant weapons in his house to discredit him. He posted the video on April 13, 2020. That same day, Saudi security forces came to his home, and Abdul Rahim Al-Huwaiti was shot dead. The government said he had opened fire first. They said they found weapons inside. Dozens of tribe members were arrested in the months that followed. Several were sentenced. Some were never heard from again. Far from Al-Qariba, hundreds of thousands of migrant workers had arrived from Bangladesh, India, Nepal, the Philippines, working 16-hour days in 50-degree heat for 14 consecutive days without rest, many describing themselves as feeling trapped, required to pay fines equivalent to 5 months' salary to leave their positions. One worker from Dhaka sent a voice message to his wife. 2 more years, he said. 2 more years and I'll come home. An ITV investigation later alleged that tens of thousands of migrant workers may have died across Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030-related construction activity. The numbers are disputed, and Saudi authorities called the claims misleading. But the system's response was not a rebuttal. It was silence. And in the silence, the construction continued because the future, this particular future, could not wait. In October 2024, Saudi Arabia held an opening ceremony for Sindalah, one of NEOM's sub-projects, a luxury island destination in the Red Sea. The opening party cost $45 million. Yachts, lights, guests flown in from around the world, global media coverage. The dream, for one evening, looked completely real. As of 2025, Sindalah remained closed to the public. No confirmed date for when it would open. No statement explaining the delay. The same month as the Sindalah party, Trojena, NEOM's planned mountain ski resort, quietly lost its hosting rights for the 2029 Asian Winter Games. The games were reassigned to Kazakhstan, with no announcement from NEOM. 3 weeks after the Sindalah party, NEOM's CEO was replaced, with no official reason given. The system had by this point perfected a specific skill. The announcement was the product, and the opening was optional. What mattered was not whether the island opened. What mattered was that the world had seen the party, and for one evening, believed. In 2022, NEOM's official communications team published 47 updates, construction milestones, partnership announcements, vision statements. In 2023, that number rose to 52, still expanding, still announcing. In 2024, it dropped to 31. In 2025, only 18. And after August, none. No construction milestones, no new partnerships, no vision statements. In late 2025, Saudi Arabia released its national pre-budget statement for 2026. NEOM was not mentioned, not criticized, not cancelled, simply not mentioned. On the last working day, before the suspension, order reached one construction team in the desert. They arrived at the site at 6 in the morning as usual, put on their equipment, and began work. Because no one had told them to stop, there had been no formal communication, and the suspension existed in documents they had not seen, in offices far from the sand. They worked until noon, then waited. No new instructions came. They packed their equipment, drove back to the workers' compound, and the next morning, they did not return. Not because they had been told not to, but because the silence, by then, was answer enough. The city didn't collapse loudly. It collapsed in the space between press releases. It would be easy, here, to end with a verdict on one man. But Mohammed bin Salman did not build NEOM alone. He accelerated a system that was already waiting to exist. McKinsey wrote the reports. AECOM designed the components. Bechtel took the contracts. McLaren put the logo on the car. Pension funds considered the exposure. Governments sent their ministers to the forums. Everyone, at every level, made the same calculation. The cost of believing was lower than the cost of not believing. In 2022, Terra Luna collapsed. $40 billion gone in 72 hours. FTX collapsed. $8 billion in customer funds disappeared. Evergrande, $300 billion in debt. The growth stopped, and so did the system. Now NEOM. Different industry, different country, different decade. Same architecture. The Howatat tribe knew. The workers in the compound knew. The consultants writing the decks knew. And they said nothing. Somewhere in Riyadh, an engineer still has the files, the renders, the blueprints, the plans for a city that will never be built. He has not deleted them. The city was never the product. Belief was.